All righty, good evening, everyone. The February 14th, 2023 meeting of the Planning Commission is now underway. And we've got a crowd on Valentine's Day. Thank you all for joining us. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. We've got several items before we get down to the new business that we're going to entertain today. So first, I'll go ahead and call roll, please, starting at my far left, if you please.
Debbie Gordon.
Deb Cameron.
Erica Harris.
Jackie Edmondson.
Elizabeth Shin.
Scott Brown.
And I'm Thomas O'Brien. Our next order of business is approval of minutes from the December 13, 2022 meeting. Do we have a motion on that?
I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Commissioner Cameron moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Are there any questions or discussions about the approval of the minutes? Any debate? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes, please raise your hand. All opposed, like sign. The motion carries. Thank you. We have an organizational and procedural item tonight. It's the election of our officers. That would be chairperson and vice chairperson of the Planning Commission. It's hard to believe a year has gone by since we did this previously, but here we are again. So we're going to go ahead and if we please, we're going to do this by motion. And if anybody would like to volunteer, I will say that I'm happy to take another swing at it if you wish. But if there's anybody else who feels strongly about it, let's know. Let's do it by motion and get this done.
I would like to make a motion to re-elect Thomas O'Brien as the chair of Planning Commission.
Erica Harris moved to approve Thomas O'Brien as chair. Is there a second?
I'd like to second.
Thank you. Are there any questions or debate on this? All right, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All opposed, like sign. All right, motion carries. We also need to do the same thing for vice chair. As you're aware, currently Erica Harris serves as our vice chair. And I would like to respectfully move that we consider Erica Harris for another term as vice chair.
A second.
There's been a motion and a second. At this time, is there any debate or question? With that said, all in favor of approving that motion, raise your hand, please. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. So meet the new bosses, same as the old bosses for now, I suppose. So thank you, everybody. We are sailing right through the agenda, but I have a feeling we're going to get into some good stuff soon. Do we have any unfinished business to handle? Okay, so at this time, we would like to entertain SLUP 22-03. That's a special land use permit to allow a 7-resident personal care home at 1822 Mount Vernon Road, as well as a concurrent variance from section 27-202. Thank you.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Thank you all for being here this evening. So the item on the agenda that we are considering today is SLUP 22-03 for 1822 Mount Vernon Road. The property owners, Anna and Roman Copeland, request a special land use permit to allow a 7-resident personal care home, and they're also requesting a concurrent variance to allow additional parking. So first, I'd like to give a little bit of background on the purpose of a special land use permit. This is the first one that we've considered in a while that's of this nature. The other special land use permits we've considered have been more similar to variances. But just to give you a brief background, there is a very short list of uses that are considered generally compatible in single dwelling neighborhoods. In the use table in section 27-58, I believe, there is an allowed use table, and it's a very short list of approved special uses. The special land use permit is not a rezoning. The approval of a special land use permit is specific to one use. So it doesn't open up the property to be used for other things. Whatever use gets approved that night, subject to whatever conditions are opposed, that's what's allowed on the property. So the special uses that are allowed in single dwelling residential neighborhoods like the R-100 zoning district are convents and monasteries, the personal care homes, maximum of 7 residents, daycares for a maximum of 6 children or adults, private schools, places of worship, cemeteries, bed and breakfasts, neighborhood recreation clubs, and home occupations, for example, tutoring or music lessons. No other uses can ask for a special land use permit. So it's a very limited set of uses that are considered compatible in single dwelling residential. And the purpose of the special land use permit is to allow the city council to essentially set conditions to mitigate negative impacts and adverse impacts. That's the main goal of the process. A little bit of background on this property. It was previously a 5,000 square foot split level home that was constructed in 1970. The home had also undergone multiple renovations over the years to add additions. It was recently demolished, so just a little visual. On the right-hand side is the pre-demolition, and then the bottom is the post-demolition. The zoning of the property is R-100, so that's a single dwelling residential unit, and the character area is suburban neighborhood.
Madeline,
Yes.
at least some of us are not seeing your presentation, the slides for your presentation up here.
Oh, you might want to switch to the window because right now it might be showing you the package, but if you switch it to the Zoom view, you should be able to see it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
That did it. Thank you.
Okay. Is everyone good? Okay. So the proposal that's under consideration tonight, again, is for a personal care home that would care for up to 7 senior citizens. It would be operated by the applicants, Anna and Roman Copeland. Anna currently operates another special care facility in another part of the Atlanta metro, and she is looking to expand her operations to Dunwoody. The proposed structure is 6,800 square feet with 7 bedrooms for the 7 residents. And then there's also additional space in the house for living space for Anna and Roman and their offices. So the new home would be, constructed generally within the same footprint of the previous home. I've highlighted the site plan just for clarity of looking at it. It can be confusing, but what you can see here is the footprint of the old home. This striped area that you see was previously a deck, and they are proposing to enclose that previous deck. So that would partially add to the square footage of the home. And then the previous home was split level, and now they're adding a partial second level. So that's also increasing the floor area from what was there previously. The driveway is shown in yellow, and that's also getting reconfigured. It was previously a horseshoe drive. And per our Public Works Department, they have what's called an access management plan, which is aimed at reducing the number of curb cuts on major roads, such as Mount Vernon Road. So this proposed driveway would be in compliance with their regulations. And then additionally, the site plan also shows that they would be planting shrubbery along the parking area to screen that. And then additionally, the setbacks in this zoning district, the front setback is called contextual. And what that means is they essentially have to build in line with what's there, right now. So you can't really build significantly in front of your neighbors, and you can't build significantly behind your neighbors. And this home would be essentially built where the previous one was, which was in line with its next door neighbor. Typically the front setback is 35 feet in a residential zone, but again, when you're redeveloping a lot like this, the setback is contextual. And then the rest of the setbacks are standard for the area. So the side setback is 10 feet and the rear setback is 40 feet. And I maybe should have highlighted this so it's a little bit easier to see, but this dashed line if you can follow, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there is a dashed line that's inside the property line. Those are the setbacks. So you can see that the house does meet the required setbacks. And then additionally, the maximum height in a residential area is 35 feet and the proposed structure is less than 35 feet. It's around 28 feet in height, which again is fairly similar to what was there previously. And then the maximum lot coverage is 60%. Our code does allow for additional lot coverage for things like churches, schools, personal care homes, those type of uses. And this proposed site plan meets that maximum lot coverage. It's under it. Another note about the lot coverage is we do require stormwater mitigation. An example of that would be infiltration trenches or flow wells. And those are things that capture stormwater and prevent it from flowing onto other properties. The applicant is also requesting a concurrent variance to increase the parking from 4 spaces to 6 spaces. Staff is not recommending approval of this request. It doesn't meet the approval criteria for a variance, first of all. There's no topographical constraints on the property, and we don't recognize a hardship either. We believe that the parking needs can be accommodated with the parking that's allowed by the code. And we would recommend that the parking area remain unstriped except for their ADA space in order to maintain a residential appearance. And then additionally, as we discussed before, they are proposing shrubbery to screen their parking area. So as far as the special land use permit, there's a set of approval criteria in the code that help us evaluate, what types of negative impacts would there be and how can we mitigate them? Can they be mitigated? So the first criteria is asking ourselves the question whether the proposed use is consistent with the policies of the comprehensive plan. So our comprehensive plan does directly state that aging in place appropriate residential is a suitable use within the suburban neighborhood character area, and that we as a city should encourage the integration of senior appropriate housing into the fabric of the community. And it's the opinion of staff that this type of small scale residential care facility for seniors meets that goal and helps us meet the requirements of our comprehensive plan. The other criteria is whether the proposed use complies with the requirements of the zoning ordinance. As we discussed previously when talking about the site plan, they meet the requirements for the setbacks, the maximum height, and the maximum lot coverage. During the permitting process, if something like this were to be approved, we do another full review to ensure compliance with all of our zoning ordinance standards. So there's a double layer of review to ensure compliance. The next criteria is whether the proposed site provides adequate land area for the proposed use. And again, as we discussed on the site plan, they are meeting their setbacks and they are not exceeding their maximum height and nor are they exceeding their lot coverage maximum. So we do feel that this is an adequate sized lot for this improvement. The other criteria, and this is extensive, it has sub-criteria, so I'll go through each of those sub-criteria. So whether the adjacent use is compatible with adjacent properties and uses, and it considers, so A is whether the proposed use will create adverse impacts on adjoining land use by reason of noise, smoke, odor, dust, or vibration generated by the proposed use. So to clarify, we do consider personal care homes per our code to be residential in nature, and the property will operate, as a home. The only difference is, it's serving a maximum of 7 people and they receive assistance with their daily needs, dressing, showering, etc. And so we don't foresee that a residential use would create any additional noise, smoke, odor, or dust compared to their neighbors. And then the second criteria is whether the proposed use will create adverse impacts upon the adjoining land use by reasons of hours of operation of the proposed use. So again, it's residential in nature. They receive visitors by appointment only, and it's generally operating within the workday, for deliveries and etc. So we don't foresee that their hours of operation would have any impacts on the surrounding area. And then the other criteria is that whether the proposed use will create adverse impacts upon adjoining land use by the manner of operation. Again, it is residential in nature and operations. It is just providing additional support to the people that live there. There's no need for industrial sized kitchens. It's served by just a general residential kitchen. And there's no, need for a grease trap or anything like that. And there's no need for a dumpster. Everything is handled the same way a residential use would be handled. They would use the same trash services as their neighbors in the same size bins. So we see this use as, low impact, and we don't anticipate adverse impacts from the operations. And then continuing these same criteria, the fourth criteria D, is that whether the traffic volume generated by the proposed use would have adverse impacts. We don't expect this to be a producer of significantly more traffic than standard residential uses. The average residential use generates about 9 trips, and we would expect this to produce maybe between 8 and 12 trips per day. The residents that live there, they don't drive, they are elderly, and they're there because they need assistance. And so, they're not driving. And so there's no generation of traffic from the residents. It is for, the 1 to 2 employees on staff and the limited numbers of visitors. So we don't expect it to, produce excessive traffic compared to surrounding properties. The next criteria is whether the scale and massing of the proposed buildings are appropriate. So the proposed home is 6,800 square feet. The previous home on the property was 5,000 square feet in the area. Again, they're not necessarily expanding that much outside the original footprint. A large reason for the increase in square footage from the previous home is due to the enclosure of a previous deck and the addition of the partial second floor. Overall, we feel that the scale and design of the building is consistent with residential homes and will not exceed the maximum height or encroach into any of the prescribed setbacks for the zoning district. And then the last criteria is whether it will adversely affect historic buildings, sites, districts, or archaeological resources, and staff is not aware of any of those on this site. So, because we feel that the applicant meets these approval criteria, we would recommend approval subject to a set of 9 conditions. And I'll just walk you all through those conditions just to sort of explain our thought process behind them. So the first 2 conditions, one is that the owner shall develop the site within general conformity to the site plan they submitted. And the second one is that they'll construct it in general conformity with the elevations that they submitted. So the purpose of those are standard conditions that get attached to most special land use permits, and it's just to ensure a degree of confidence in what we're being shown here today and what the final product at build out would be. So the third criteria is regarding the materials for the front facade. So we're recommending that 80% of the front house facade be finished with high quality materials such as brick, stone, stucco, and glass. And that's, Mount Vernon is a highly traversed road here in Dunwoody. And so we want to ensure high quality design along this street. The fourth criteria is the parking area should not be striped except for the required ADA space. And again, this ensures that the driveway will be generally consistent with the other residential homes around Mount Vernon Road. So again, maintaining that residential character. The fifth criteria is that the parking area shall provide a vegetative screen. And this further sort of screens the parking area, again, to mitigate any visual impacts from the large parking pad. So the sixth condition is we have in our code defined a number of different transition yards that provide different levels of screening between different types of uses. And so staff finds that transition yard 2 would be an appropriate, way to screen the property, to address concerns of, a new structure being built. We felt that a vegetative screen would be an appropriate way to mitigate that concern. And if you guys have more questions about the transition yard 2, I can definitely pull up those standards in the zoning ordinance and we can look at them. But generally, it's a 10-foot buffer that requires trees and shrubs. And then the seventh criteria, or excuse me, condition is that the personal care home will be limited to residents 55 years and older. So this is to ensure that it is serving the elderly population that the applicant in their letter of intent states they will serve. So this is to ensure that the aging in place requirements are met. And then condition number 8, this one's a little bit complicated wording, but within 2 years of approval of the subject special land use permit, if a home is not under construction, the walls and foundation of the previously demolished home must be removed and the site permanently stabilized. So as I showed you a couple of slides earlier, they for the most part demolished the previous structure. All that's existing is the foundation and a couple of old walls. And, you know, it is considered sort of an eyesore. It's not an ideal situation on Mount Vernon. So, you know, if a special land use permit here is approved, but for some reason, you know, because of COVID, supply delays, you know, any issues with the market, impending recession, you know, if it can't be built right away, that we can at least mitigate, you know, the sort of considered eyesore that's there. So that would just require them to remove the walls and remove the foundation. And by site stabilization, permanently stabilized means sod. So they would essentially grass the lot. And then the 9th criteria, that's related to public works. It states that streetscape improvements shall be installed in conjunction with the construction of the personal care home, according to the recommendations of the Public Works Director. So that would just be, you know, if the Public Works Director, according to his discretion, requires them to build a sidewalk that's consistent with their plans for Mount Vernon, they would have the ability to do that. So those are all the conditions that staff has proposed. You guys, of course, are welcome to consider other conditions, reword any of these conditions. And if you have questions, I'm definitely ready to address them. And then I believe the applicant also has a presentation prepared as well.
Okay, does anybody have questions for Madeline before we hear the applicant as well as the fors or against? I'm going to ask if we have any quick questions, let's handle them now, and then we'll let the fors and against speak, and then we'll circle back to questioning. Anybody have any quick questions?
I have a question. So how many staff will be working? I think you said something about 1 or 2.
So Anna and Roman Copeland, my understanding based on conversations with Anna is that Roman would be sort of the main operator of this personal care home. So we would consider that one staff person. And then they also typically have one additional support person that comes in and shifts.
Okay, so they wouldn't have like someone cooking and someone with medical, you know, like they would do like
I
those
don't,
1 or 2
I don't
people would
know
do all of
fully about the full operations of the personal care home per se. So I would recommend that the applicant or the applicant's representative address those.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Commissioner Edmondson?
Yeah, hey Madeline, thank you for the presentation. Can you talk to me a little bit about the definition between group living and then what is considered a primary household? Like if somebody's living there, how did you guys get to that recommendation based off of somebody being there from that family that owns it full time?
So our code has 2 different categories. One is the single family category, and that's truly just a household. And the way our code defines household is you're either related by blood, and there's really no limit on the amount of people who are related by blood that can live on a property. And then the second within household, we allow up to 4 unrelated persons. So you could have essentially 4 roommates renting out a house in Dunwoody. So that's single dwelling residential. And then our group living uses, that includes community living arrangements. It includes the personal care homes, and it includes other things like nursing homes. Nursing homes aren't allowed in residential districts at all, but personal care homes are allowed, as well as community living arrangements. And that is essentially the people that live on the property are not related by blood, and they are not necessarily the direct owners of the property. And, you know, with a personal care home, there's, you know, the added, you know, the people that are living there are receiving additional support from staff and the owners of the property. And that's what triggers the difference between just regular single family and anything considered group living.
Okay. I guess the only piece that I was thinking through is if the owner is living there.
So that's already an allowed use.
Okay. Okay.
And the
just-
personal care home is extra on top of that.
Okay, got it. And then the only other question I had is, out of the conditions that you guys set forth, what happens if they don't do all of them? What is the recourse then?
So a lot of the conditions are related to the development of the property. So, the enforcement of, the site plan and the final built product, the elevations. And we have control over that through the building permit process. If they are violating any other items such as the, if they let in someone who's not considered a senior citizen, is under 55 years of age, that is something that gets handled through typically the code enforcement department. They can be issued a citation. And that's how that gets mitigated, is through reporting. If they're violating any of their conditions, code enforcement has the authority to go in there and enforce them and write the proper citations.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Brown.
Yes. Wanted to clarify on the one appointment per day. Is that one appointment total or one appointment per resident?
Again, that might be a question for the operator or
Okay.
the operator's representative about how they handle their visitation. We haven't listed any conditions that specifically limit the visitation. But my understanding is that it's by appointment only.
Okay, I'll ask the applicant to clarify that. Could you confirm the size of the property? Because I believe in your report, it listed 0.5 acres even. I think in a couple of the letters from citizens, I think it referred to it as 0.38. So I just wanted to clarify that it is 0.5 and not 0.38 acres. Is that?
It is 0.5 acres, or to my knowledge, I can pull up the site plan real quick and I can check and double check right now. Sorry, it's just taking me a minute
That's
to
okay.
pull up. 1 second. Yes, the property is 0.5 acres.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. At this time, we're going to go ahead and hear from the proponent as well as those in favor. Generally speaking, we limit each block, those proponents and those opponents, to 10 minutes apiece. I have kind of indicators in front of me that might indicate that we have an excess of that. And so at the 10-minute mark, we will, as a commission, entertain whether to extend that. But I want everybody here to know who is waiting to make comments. Should we extend it for one side, we will extend it for the other so that everybody will have an equal opportunity to be heard. But we will put the brakes on at 10 minutes to take a second vote should there be the need arise. So want everybody to kind of know what to expect. One other thing I want everybody who's here to know about is our decision today and our guidance today is advisory. We're not here to make a binding decision. This is not the thumbs up or thumbs down on the project, but rather council looks to us for guidance. And they look to us for guidance based on what the public shares with us, what our thoughts are. And so I want everybody to keep that in mind. This is part of a multi-step process, and I would ask that everybody keep that in mind as you offer your comments, because your comments are being made part of the record and will be considered by multiple parties. So at this time, I would invite the applicant up and please introduce yourself. Tell us where you live and take it away.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Andre Washington, counsel for the applicant from Anderson Tate Car, 1960 Satellite Boulevard, Duluth, Georgia. I'm honored to be here on behalf of the applicant Legacy Manor Homes, Anna and Roman Copeland, here to request a special land use permit for the property at 1822 Mount Vernon Road, Dunwoody, Georgia. I'd also like to commend the county staff. They've worked with us hand in hand throughout this process and have been excellent to keep the lines of communication open with. And Madeline did an excellent job of kind of giving you the nuts and bolts of the county's analysis, and we are in agreement with the county's proposed recommendation of approval. City. I'm coming from Gwinnett County, used to talking to the city, talking about counties. I apologize about that. Not starting off on. And also happy Valentine's Day to everyone. My wife will be happy once I get home. In any event, we will double check on the discrepancy when it comes to acreage, but this is for 822 Mount Vernon Road in Dunwoody, Georgia. The current zoning is R100 for a single dwelling facility. The proposed zoning is R100. Important to note, there is no change to the zoning. There have been concerns and issues about introducing a formal commercial use in to the area. What's important to note is that this is a residential facility, and this will continue to be a residential facility, and so we'll comport with the uses in the area. So it's not like you're introducing a commercial use into an area that's already residential that leads to what can be characterized as a slippery slope, where you have one commercial use and it green lights others. This is specifically for a 7-resident personal care home. So suburban neighborhood character area as defined by the city of Dunwoody is a vision of intent, stable, owner-occupied single-family residential areas with accessible sidewalks, extensive landscaping, access to parks, and functional green space, places of worship, and schools. Future development is traditional homes with quality design, long-lasting building materials such as stone or brick, streetscaping, pedestrian and cycle amenities. Use is an important part. Single-family residential, public gathering space, place of worship, or aging in place and for the appropriate residential purposes. So let's talk about the existing site. The subject property is either half an acre or 3.8 acres. I need to double check the survey. The previous structure was a 5,000 square foot home with significant structural damage. So to that end, Anna and Roman purchased this home with the intent to renovate it. In the course of renovations, they found that someone added a structure and didn't put a foundation. And so it's impossible to continue to do a complete renovation without adding foundation. And so Anna and Roman, who have been doing this for a long time in terms of residential personal care facilities, decided to raise the house and to build a new structure and make it a personal care facility. So as has been noted, the facility right now has been torn down. Here's what's important to know. They did not come into the city with the idea that they were going to introduce commercial use and just kind of flip the property and put a nursing home inside of a residential area. Over the course of doing renovations, they've determined that this home wasn't tenable for the type of renovations and instead decided to make it a place for elder and personal care in the long term. So the surrounding zoning classifications. This particular facility is in the heart of a residential area. We recognize that. And so as has been noted in our application and as has been noted throughout Madeline's presentation, the city of Dunwoody has a lot of housing stock, but not a lot of places for elders to potentially age in place. And what we know is that over the next 30 years, the aging population across the country is going to double. So it's not a question of if they're coming, it's when, and it's where they're going to go. And what we know is that elders who want to age in place don't always want to be sent off into a nursing home facility or have to go into facilities that aren't comfortable for them. They like to be in residential communities where they feel like this is home. And this particular population that Anna serves are individuals that need that extra care, that difficult moment we all have had potentially where you realize what mom or dad or grandma or grandpa needs is beyond what I can provide. And so I need somebody that's going to be there 24/7 to make sure that their needs, their general needs are taken care of. And so what we recognize, at least when it comes to this particular presentation, is we think that we comport with, and the staff agrees with us, the classifications that this city has outlined about what should happen in residential areas. The question for the neighbors, rightfully so, are who's coming in the neighborhood? Why are you here? And is this going to impact us in a negative way? And that is a fair question when you talk about adding a facility in a residential area. And so I want to introduce you to who Legacy Manor is and who Anna and Roman are. So let's talk about the project summary specifically. Nuts and bolts, it'll be a house for 7 residents, 7 individuals that will stay there, and 1 24-hour staff person. The proposed building will be 6,800 square feet with a 660 square foot deck. That's only 1,800 square foot larger than the previous facility, which was 5,000 square foot. So essentially it's like adding another floor, adding another layer. So it's not that much of a difference. Now it might feel much larger and it'll look much larger, but essentially the previous structure was already pretty sizable. The request for additional parking spaces was based on one primary thing. You know, you have 7 residents that don't really drive. You have 7 different families potentially that might want to come visit. You have 1 ADA handicap parking space, 1 staff person that's going to be there 24/7, and potentially 1 staff person that moves in and out. What we don't want to be is in a position where grandkids come to visit, families come to visit, and you have 2 people visiting at the same time, and we're unable to accommodate that on one given circumstance or not because we're limited to 4 parking spots. That was the base of the request. But to the extent that it means so much to the neighbors, and it rightfully so, this isn't to put a commercial parking lot in the front. It's to make sure that we can accommodate safely emergency vehicles and visitors. But as a normal matter, as Madeline mentioned, these facilities won't be home to people that are driving. These individuals are not mobile. Research suggests that a senior facility where seniors are mobile use about 1/5 of the amount of driving as a normal resident. So it's already reduced because of the residents. So to that note, the front facade will be 80% of durable materials as the code and as the city, has requested. The parking will have a vegetative screen. What does that mean? That means that we're going to put large trees in front of the facility. So you will maybe see the top of the building, but you will see actual lined, nicely manicured trees that sit out in front and border Mount Vernon Road. And again, the city will be, the facility will be limited to individuals 55 and older. And so as you can see from the site plan, this area right here speaks to that vegetative buffer. So what individuals will see when they're driving past are essentially evergreen trees, or what would look like evergreen trees that will be tall and neatly manicured in front of the property. So what this will look like essentially is a very large house on a lot on Mount Vernon Road. So it's as if someone decided that they want to purchase a property and build and renovate and build a larger property on a lot. But instead, what's happening inside, I think, is a lot more noble than just one individual. So let's talk about these individuals. I'll be honest, I do a lot of land use and zoning hearings and things like that. I am truly, truly honored to be standing here representing Anna and Roman Copeland. Anna has been doing senior care for about 22 years. And she immigrated from Moldova and began this out of a true desire to help people. And the residents that she serves are mostly veterans and seniors and folks who can't care for themselves. And as we have this massive debate in this city, in this county, in this country about housing and where we allow people to age, folks like Anna are exactly what we want in places where you don't have the inventory to build a massive elder care facility where it needs to blend in neatly with the community. And so again, I recognize that the community would have a number of different objections, but as Madeline mentioned, you're not talking about industrial size garbage cans. You're not talking about grease traps. You're not talking about a group home or people that are recovering from addictions, although those folks need places to stay too. This is not designed for that type of resident. What you have here is a woman and her family who have devoted their lives in small businesses work to help those that are in the sunset of their lives who don't have very many places to go. And so the question before us is, does this comport from a land use perspective with the residential community? We hope on our best day that it does, that seniors who need a place to stay could come to a area like this, be in an excellent home, a new facility that caters to their needs specifically, that has specific tailoring of people to visit, doctor's visits and the like, and blends in with the community. So they're not necessarily sent to an urban area where it is industrial. So they can age in place with dignity, Anna is not new to this. Anna owns another successful business. I'm happy to pause right now. I meant to reserve the rest of my time, but I got a little waxing poetic about Anna and the development. But with that, I'm happy to show you the other slides of the elevations. This is what the
Hang on for just a moment. We need to, what I want to make sure that we do is we reflect both sides, for and against equally, and
Sure.
we're going to need to address that with a motion at this point. I'm assuming we want to hear the entire portion of the presentation. I know I'd like to. Can we get a motion to that effect?
I make a motion to extend the time in favor to be able to hear the rest of the applicant's presentation, as well as offer public commentary in favor of.
Can you please propose a specific minute count in that motion so that we can, and if we need to revise it again, we'll do that, but let's try and put minutes to that so then we can have both sides.
I make a motion to extend the public comment in favor of the applicant's proposal, including the applicant's presentation, another 10 minutes.
Okay, so Commissioner Harris, if I'm understanding, you moved to extend by 10 minutes each side of the argument that we're going to hear. Is that correct? For a total of 20 minutes per side?
Do you want me to rephrase it? Because I did not say it.
I think that'll be the net effect, though. If you care to, that'd be great.
All right, we'll make it easy. I would like to extend the comment or a public comment in favor of the application by 10 minutes, thereby extending the time against the applicant, the application by 10 minutes, making a 20-minute for against.
All right, Commissioner Harris put together 20 minutes per side. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
All right, I heard Commissioner Brown second. Is there any debate about this? All right, so we've got a motion and a second at this time. If we would like to proceed with that, please raise your hand in favor. All opposed, like sign. All right, the motion carries, I believe, 6-1. So we would ask you to please proceed, but also please keep in mind, you are going to be sharing time with anybody else in the gallery who wishes to speak in favor.
Correct. So to that end, I will say that these are the elevations of the facility, these proposed elevations of this of the particular facility. And finally, I will say that all the regulations related to how the facility will be managed consistent with the Georgia state codes in terms of how these facilities are managed, personal care facilities. And it has a long track record of managing these facilities, and we have letters in support to that effect. So any questions about how the facility will manage, obviously code enforcement will have purview over the actual development, but in terms of the day-to-day management, that will fall to the State Department that they have successfully managed over the past over the past 2 decades. With that, I'm going to reserve whatever remaining time I have for rebuttal to the extent that it is necessary.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, we'd like to, Madeline, did you have remarks? Oh,
Just stopping the share screen.
gotcha. At this time, we would invite any additional parties speaking in favor. Please come up, introduce yourself, tell us where you live, and we'll be interested to hear your thoughts.
Good evening, Robert Wittenstein, 1146 Boardwalk Court. I'm here to support the applicant and also the recommendations made by staff. When the applicant came to the Dunwoody Homeowners Association meeting a couple of months ago, there were a bunch of questions raised about what the impact would be on the neighbors. And I have several points and I'll try to make them briefly. The first is, let me remind everybody that personal care homes are required by law to be in residential areas. Second, SLUPs, special land use permits, by their nature, are not something that can be applied generally. They are all applied specifically. So unlike zoning changes, where you could claim, hey, you changed the zoning for this landowner, I have a right to the same zoning change because I'm in a similar situation. You could create a zoning cascade with SLUPs. That doesn't apply. They are by their nature individual. Next, I want to just point out the obvious is that none of us are guaranteed that we will live in a community without any annoyances whatsoever. Some of us have to put up with barking dogs. Some of us have to put up with teenagers or loud music or people who have parties, or we have to put up with people who like to mow their grass early in the morning. Whatever it is, we live in a community and we expect our community members to be courteous. And we also expect our community members to be somewhat understanding. So I am confident that this personal care home will create fewer annoyances to the neighbors than the people who lived there previously. Because the people who lived there previously were a serious problem. Let me also point out that what we're talking about here is a place for our seniors who don't want to go into an institution to age. And, you know, we've talked about the fact that in Dunwoody, we really don't have enough places for seniors to age in place. And if I were getting older, this is exactly the kind of environment that I would want to be in. A small group of people, each in their own bedroom, having a relatively simple lifestyle with somebody who cares about me, making my meals and helping me with my daily activities. So I would encourage you all to have both compassion, but also a sense of community, that this is the kind of facility we want. And let me remind you, there are personal care homes scattered all over Dunwoody, and they operate under the radar. They aren't noticed by their neighbors. They don't create any kind of a disturbance. They are there because we've decided that people may not all need to be in institutions, whether they're developmentally disabled or whether they're aged. We want them in our communities. I did, along with Sue Ellis, go up to Anna's existing personal care home in Duluth. We drove up there. We took the day. They gave us a tour. I was incredibly impressed. This is clean. The people we met were quiet. They were happy. Anna was there. She was cooking something in the crock pot for lunch. There was the only cars in the driveway were the cars that we had brought plus Anna's. These people will be good neighbors. And I would encourage you to support their ability to be here in Dunwoody. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wittenstein. At this time, are there any other individuals who wish to come up and speak in favor?
Hi there. My name is Jennifer Jones. I live at 1830 Mount Vernon Road. In fact, you could see our house in the first photo of the before residence before it was taken down. We have had the privilege of getting to know Anna and Roman and Mike and Victoria. They are absolutely lovely people, and there's nothing I could say that could follow that other than we will be living 10 feet from them, and we fully support this. We welcome them to the neighborhood and think they can bring so much positivity, grace, and compassion, and we hope that you'll support it as well.
Thank you for your comment. Any further comments in favor, please?
Hi, how's everybody tonight?
Hi.
My name is Angela Stingo, and I don't actually live in the county. I'm the consultant on the project. So what will happen is if everything is approved and moves forward, I have a background in regulatory compliance. And so I will help with the licensure, making sure the facility is in place. I dealt with her on the first project. I will continue to kind of oversee the compliance aspect of this whole thing. So I just wanted to say that I'm in favor of it. I worked at the state licensing department for years, so I'm very familiar with the ins and outs of the regulatory process, the concepts. I've been in a million homes because I used to regulate them on the state side. I now work privately. I can tell you from personal experience that I've been in large facilities. I've been in very small facilities, many of which don't have a tight ship. They don't operate, and they really ultimately shouldn't even be open. However, being the powers that be, we only have so many people that regulate these facilities, right? You can only do so much. But what I can tell you about her facility is it's an exception, number one. Number two, I want to attest to what the gentleman spoke about previously, is that the quality of care and the intimacy and the level of care is very different. I've worked in nursing homes. I went into assisted living facilities as a regulator. I can tell you the level of intimacy and the level of care is way different. People sometimes fall in love with the aesthetics of a larger facility. There's a common misperception that these people are more educated than the smaller facilities. That's not always the case. And I can tell you that the staff are overworked, underpaid, and they're only required to have one staff to every 15 residents. So I would like and encourage you all, as you're making decisions for your own loved ones, to think about that when you're thinking about putting mom or dad in a nursing home or assisted living. Because I can tell you, I've seen some that are not good at all. With that being said, it's going to be perfect for the community. They're absolutely right. I probably had dealt with one project when I was at the state level for 8 years that was anywhere near Dunwoody that was offering this type of service. It's needed. Everybody has a family member that's 55 and up, right? I'm 52. I'm going to have to make these decisions pretty soon. My mom and dad are baby boomers. I literally am still taking care of my father. When he's ready to transition, if that happens and I'm not able to allow him to die at home and age in place, I will definitely put him in a facility such as this because I regulate them, so I know about them. And I just want everybody to have an open mind and think about that when you're making your own personal decisions, because we're all going to be there. And there's several of us in here that are already in our 50s. Please understand these decisions are going to be made at some point. So I want you to take everything that was said into consideration. If you have questions about regulatory stuff, I'm the person for that. I will be here after the meeting. You guys are welcome to come to me, talk to me about it. If you have concerns, I will be here till the end. That's pretty much it. And happy Valentine's Day. And hopefully we can get out of here early enough to eat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other individuals here to speak in favor of this project? Okay, so Paul, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not saying anybody else. It looks like we have a minute or two reserved for rebuttal, and so we'll hang on to that, Mr. Washington. At this time, we'd like to hear from opponents. Now, I've got a list of folks that were kind enough to supply public comment cards. And so what I'm going to do, if it's all right with everybody, is just go one at a time. I'm gonna read names, come up when you hear your name, and let us know who you are, where you live, and share your comments. I will say I've got a pretty healthy stack here. And so it's going to be a challenge to get through these in 20 minutes. So I would respectfully request that everybody keep things moving and, just want to keep moving forward. So at this time, I would welcome up Neela Abu Bakar up, please.
Commission and I think mostly neighbors. My name's Nyla Abubakar. I live at 1823 Mount Vernon Road. My husband and I, we purchased the house about 10 years ago. Since then, we've welcomed 2 boys, now have a 5-year-old and 15-month-old. So I didn't purchase my home to live next to a place of worship, a cemetery, a monastery, or any other facility that might be deemed appropriate by a body that could evaluate it. But I did indeed purchase my house to live in the heart of a residential community, and I live directly across from where this facility is slated to be constructed. I'm intimately familiar with the property that existed previously. I'm a licensed professional engineer, civil structural engineer. I know a little bit about building houses, foundations, and I'm just not really excited about this project. You know, the attorney that previously spoke, he flashed the zoning map. So, I mean, Dunwoody is a residential neighborhood, and that's something that I think I personally hold near and dear. I have parents that I take care of that I love dearly, but it's not why I bought my house, to have this facility across from me. So I'll keep it brief. If anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer. But that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, Carrie Downing, please, if you'd like to make comments, please come forward.
Just to take the quote from what he said before,
If I could get you speaking to the microphone, that'd be
the
great.
first person who was speaking and giving the presentation, he made the statement that we hope we represent on our best day what we're supposed to be. But we're gonna have to live with them on their average day and on their worst day. And I second what Nyla said. We did not buy in this bedroom community to live next to live next to a facility that is gonna have this much activity. The business plan seems a little off to me as well. So you're in the middle, you bought a house, you're in the middle of fixing up this house and you decide that it's not working for you, so you decide to demo it and create a business plan to make a memory care facility. Well, what happens when this doesn't work and we are now left with this structure that has been built for a memory care facility that now could maybe sit abandoned, that kind of thing? Like, what happens next? So we've built a structure that's not a home. It's going to have to be a business. And what happens for that person when you have this use approved for this business that's not part of the community until they just bought into it? They bought into it, it didn't work. So that is my concern, that the business plan is not sound. It's not going to make it. We're going to be left with a structure that someone else is going to come back in, and we don't know what's going to go in there. We can't control the future. Every business has their ups and downs.
Thank you. Next comment, Helen Flynn, please. Thank you, ma'am. Mike DeLoretti, please.
Mike DeLoretti, live at 1506 Thornhill Court. Just a couple points that I would raise. So on the proposal, I believe that the proposal fails SLUP consideration 3, whether the proposed site provides adequate land area for the proposed use of all required open space off-street parking. So the proposed use of the development requires 4 parking spaces, but the applicant states additional parking spaces are required and included a companion variance to exceed the parking spaces considered by Dunwoody Code. Also, as far as SLUP consideration 4, I believe the proposal fails there. Whether the proposed use is compatible with adjacent property and land uses. The development to be constructed is not compatible with adjacent properties at roughly 6,900 square feet. If you look at side parcels, 1830 Mount Vernon Road, 5100 Mount Vernon Way, 5101 Vernon Ridge Drive, 5109 Vernon Ridge Drive. The largest one of any of those is approximately 35 to 3,600 square feet. If you look at the rear parcels, 3 there, 5116 Mount Vernon Way, 1563 Vernon Way Court, and 1515 Vernon Ridge Drive. The largest one there is 2,800 square feet. And across the street, parcels 1805 Mount Vernon Road, 1813 Mount Vernon Road, 1823 Mount Vernon Road, 5076 Mount Vernon Way. The largest one there is 3269. So this is significantly larger than all of the other homes in the area. Last point that I'd mention is that I believe that this proposal violates the definition of group living, including a personal care home of Dunwoody Codes ordinances, section 27-12. So the codified reference to other than a household means that the development cannot simultaneously serve as a primary residence household dwelling for the applicant's family, while also serving as a personal care home for others. The applicant states on page 8 of the PDF that the applicant's family will reside there as well. Additionally, on page 57, the community meeting notice, which states the applicant and her son will also live there. The Dunwoody code is clear. Either it is a group living dwelling or it's a primary residence household dwelling, but it cannot be both without city council amending the Dunwoody code. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to call Nancy Jester up, please.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for your service on the Planning Commission and congratulations to your new election, to your
Thank you.
positions. I appreciate your service to the community. I'd like to raise a couple of flaws, I think, in the application. And first I want to state that I'm really pro group home. I had the great fortune when I served on the DeKalb County Commission as a commissioner for District 1 to approve a number of group homes. They were done with a charity that's actually right here in the city of Dunwoody, JF&CS, Jewish Family and Career Services. I think that's what it stands for. They run a number of group homes and do a great job in communities. The difference between their applications and the type that I'm seeing here is qualitative in nature, I think. So you had 100% buy-in too from the communities that they went into, and they have a long track record, a great track record of running homes there. But they have a smaller footprint. They really do blend in and keep the characteristic of the neighborhood very stable. So I think one of the flaws with this is that it's so large. It's 7 with a resident worker, a staff member staying there with them as well. So I think that the size is actually too big. Not so much the size of the building, perhaps, although I do object to that. I do object to the footprint. But the number of residents, I think it's just too much because it doesn't blend. That's the whole point of the SLUPs. I love the idea of the aging in place and having places where we can give care to vulnerable residents that need it. But this is very qualitatively different than that. This is kind of in that middle ground. It looks very commercial to me. And I do think there is a slippery slope argument to make. I worry then about the nature of the corridor from the village to Jet Ferry, because once you do something this grand, then you're going to see highest and best uses start coming out and SLUP applications start coming from all of the homes that then front Mount Vernon. I think you'll see it on the Peachtree Road corridor too, as you get closer to the perimeter. I think you could see a number of those homes start to apply for these types of SLUPs, and you could really change the residential nature of these corridors. Doesn't happen overnight, but for instance, you can look at La Vista Road from the perimeter to the Main Street and Tucker, and you could see where house after house after house went from the single family use to very different commercial uses. And so it does happen over time. You've seen it in a number of places in DeKalb County. There's plenty to see to give you pause and give evidence to that. So I think that my request would be for you to deny it. If you don't, I would ask that you defer this application so that staff could work perhaps with the applicant to reduce the scope, the size of this care home from 7 to 4. I think that would be an appropriate size to manage, and that would be something that blends with the community. I would have no problem if we had a qualified applicant buy a house on my street, which is much further in the neighborhood, and turn it into a care home for 4 people. I would be here speaking in support of that. If they had a good track record, if it was a JF&CS type track record, where they really make an effort to be part of the community with the size of the facility itself. And in fact, in those particular applications, they kept the house, they just retrofitted the house. They didn't scrape the land and build a much bigger building. So I would again respectfully request, if you don't give this an outright denial for all of the reasons that I've entailed, that you at least defer it. I would also like you to consider the fact that the changes that are going to happen to that corridor, given the entitlements that have recently been given to the village, it's going to change the character of that over time. There are certainly more residential units that have been allowed now as a matter of zoning in that area, and that has yet to really play out. So we don't know all the implications there. So I think please consider that as well. But again, my request is for denial. And if not, then I request that you at least defer it and consider a condition of fewer than 7 residents. And my suggestion would be 4. I am also going to hand out, I'll give this to the staff member, if you could share this with the council. My neighbor went today to the some of the other care homes that the applicant owns, and you can see the one in Lawrenceville and the one in Snellville. They have very different characteristics than this particular corridor. They look very different. They look much more commercial, which, to my point, this is not the care home that blends in that you want to support, which I think everybody, well, I don't speak for everybody, I speak for myself, but I certainly support care homes for the reasons that the comprehensive plan suggests that we should support those things. You can see that what they have going on in Lawrenceville and Snellville certainly does not comport with that, and certainly is not in keeping with the character area of the Mount Vernon corridor there. So I'm going to give this to staff to share with you. These are pictures from today.
Thank you. Don Flynn. I've heard. Gray Plunkett.
Hello, my name is Gray Plunkett. I live at 1444 Vernon Ridge Court, around the corner from this facility. I think I learned a lot about this facility, and it sounds like a very nice concept, and what they provide for seniors sounds good. One question I have is, they talked about these residents won't be likely to drive. I didn't get a firm. My question is, will the residents in here be required not to have a car? Because I don't see how this could possibly work if even one resident had a car, because the owners might have 2 cars, and that's 3, and they only have 4 places. So the one question is it a requirement that a person cannot have a car if they live in this facility? So that's one question. And the concept is good, and I support the whole idea of having senior living facility that fits in a residential, but I question how appropriate this location is for that on Mount Vernon. It sounds like to be, for what all I've heard about what you want for these seniors, being on a road like Mount Vernon in that busy corridor, it would be more appropriate to be inside of the subdivision on a cul-de-sac or something, and with a little bit larger acreage, a lot to facilitate everything. I mean, my dad had dementia, Alzheimer's, I'm sure I might say these residents are not, we might not be Alzheimer residents, but if you're a senior, you can start to develop dementia and the whole idea is so they can be in the community. Obviously, they want to go for a walk, and they're going to be walking on Mount Vernon. And if they have a little dementia, you don't want somebody with dementia, older person. It's not the safest place. The interior of a subdivision seems like more appropriate. And this kind of relates to the other question someone mentioned of how this came about, that the owners bought it to be residents to live in this home, and then the whole way the previous structure led them to make it go to this usage. Well, I think if they were trying to find a place in Dunwoody to do this, they would have picked a more appropriate place than on Mount Vernon, where it is located now. So that's my primary objection.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to call Danny Shortle up, please.
I'm Denny Shortle, live 2011 Woodland Way, Dunwoody, Georgia, 30338. Thanks for all the good work all of you are doing up here and on the planning board. I appreciate it. And I understand after I left office, they gave you a raise. So I think that's fantastic. We're sure getting to be some nice people. We became a city. I was the co-chairman of the group that pushed the cityhood vote, and I knocked on doors, and we knew we had one chance to become a city and one chance only. And we told the people what we were going to do. We knew what they wanted. And number one was zoning. Number one reason it says Dunwoody, Georgia behind you, is because the citizens of this city wanted some type of zoning regulations that weren't being done by the county at the time. Then, we had keep taxes low, better police force. We promised them 4 things, and we beat on that, and I knocked on doors and we won. If we would have had this as one of the things that we had promised them, I don't know if we'd have won. I know another thing, if we had have promised them this, plus we're gonna pass a bond issue, city of Dunwoody would not be here today. Because I talked to the people personally, one-on-one at their doors all through the city. So I think one of the things we have to look at is, you know, that we became a city to equal the treatment for everyone. Doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, black, white, you know, Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, no matter what it is, everybody's got a stake in this city, everyone. And I think we got to remember that the folks there living on that area, one lady did, she's okay with it. But you know, I don't know if the others are. And the question I would propose to each of you tonight is when you sit there and when you're going to raise your hand is, would I want this to come next to me for my house and my family? I think that's the biggest thing you have to take a look at tonight, you know, and remember, if it's not next to your house, you know, but you represent those people that are on both sides of all this going on. So please think twice, think it over in your mind. If you can present enough strong factors that they can control it, okay, well, maybe okay. But the big thing is, whatever you do, think of the folks that are in the area, because they are just like you and me, a resident of Dunwoody, Georgia, the best city in the state of Georgia. Thank you.
Next, if we could please hear from Gina Parody.
Hi, good evening. I'm Gina Parody, and I have basically 6 points. I didn't realize there was such a time constraint, so I'll try to go fast. First point, the activities at this property to date have given my husband and I no confidence in their ability to be honest around the future use and actions of their property. Sorry, I didn't mention we live at 1563 Vernon Way Court, so we're right behind. They changed the plans. They manually demolished this property by hand. And now it's an eyesore to our community. We feel that the size is much too big for the associated property. We have personally, along with our neighbor, had drainage issues since we moved in. We've spent thousands and thousands of dollars because of the former owners. So we have a lot of concern about that. We also feel like there's a lack of privacy for our home. The fence they put in truly offers zero privacy to our house. They're requesting a large 2-story deck. Again, no privacy. We're concerned about future home values. We're also concerned about future usage for this home, as far as what's going to happen if they decide to sell it. Obviously, it's limited to being a retirement facility based off of how they're building it. And I also just lastly want to say that this is Pandora's box. And as the nice gentleman before said, we are literally surrounding. So please, when you're making the decision, think of people who, you know, people like us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to hear from Deborah Brown, please.
Good evening. I live at 5019 Mount Vernon Way, which is about 2/10 of a mile from the residence at issue. And I did submit written comments, and I'm not going to really repeat the same ones. I do truly believe that this is a commercial endeavor. There is not a building there today. It will be a new built from the ground up. It is almost circumventing the zoning laws in some ways, in my opinion, to call it a slub. But also, got my notes, I've got too many. I just really feel like the need for this should also be considered. We have folks that have spoken about their reliance on the fact that this is a residential zoned neighborhood when they bought their properties, and now, you know, this is going to be changed for 7 beds, when in fact we have countless, or not countless, but so many beds around here that are in living senior facilities. And I also question the whole aging in place concept. I mean, I guess I've always understood that to be that as I age, I want to stay in my home or in my community. And I think that is what the Dunwoody Comprehensive Plan is referring to, that I took a look at myself because it was relied on here pretty heavily, that this is part of the, you know, the city has support for this. And I don't think it is like your typical residential home owner that lives in their home that is going to bring in elder citizens for help
I'm going to go
in their
ahead.
day-to-day lives. But so I feel again that this is really a commercial entity and that the creep that is going to happen on Mount Vernon Road is real.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
comments. That represents the end of the time, yet I have what appear to be at least 4 more comments in opposition. So again, I'll look to the commission and ask, what's your pleasure?
I think we should terminate public comment, leave Mr. Washington with his remaining time and move on to discussion. I have a dinner reservation, sorry.
Yeah, no, understood. Is there anybody who feels different and wants to form a motion? Because to terminate public comment, we don't need a motion, but if anybody feels different, we do need to entertain a motion.
I know it's Valentine's and I know we have public comment. I actually believe because we have such a significant amount of public here, that this is something that I would like to give at least 10 more minutes to allow the 4 voices. I would encourage those 4 voices to speak succinctly. And even, I mean, I would be happy to do 8 minutes, 2 minutes per person, to allow them to speak.
Okay.
Is there a way to poll the people out there and see if, my concern would be if we're hearing, if like the word ditto sometimes works great, y'all. So you don't have to come out back and repeat the same thing. If you sent a letter, I want to promise you, we've read all of your letters. And so is there a way to, Commissioner O'Brien, to ask the people out there see if they need to
Well,
speak still?
I can certainly run through the names and I'm sorry, are you Mr. Brown? Okay, so am I okay. All right. Well, I have 3 other names up here and then perhaps there are other people that wish to speak. So let me just ask you, Betty Fendrick. Okay, hang on. We're not calling you up just yet. Okay, so we do have some novel things to share. Judy Landers. Okay, and Min Fan. Okay, so yeah, let's okay, form a motion if you please.
But I would just make a motion to. I make a motion to extend public comment on both sides by 5 more minutes. That would be 5 more minutes against, and then 5 minutes plus, I believe it was about 2 minutes remaining for rebuttal from the applicant.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor made by Commissioner Harris to extend public comment by 5 minutes per side. Is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Brown seconds. At this time, is there any debate? Or are we prepared to go on to a vote? Looks like we're prepared to go on to a vote. Motion's been formed and seconded. All in favor of extending a public comment for 5 minutes per side, raise your hand. All opposed, like sign. Looks like the motion carries 6-1. Let's proceed. At this time, I would respectfully request Ms. Landers, please come forward.
I'm Judy Landers. I live at 1564 Vernon Way Court. My cul-de-sac parallels Mount Vernon Road, and my property is not adjacent to 1822, but I can see it from my property. So my number one concern, which I don't believe has been addressed tonight, is traffic. Now, I knew that when I bought my property. Traffic along Mount Vernon, if you're there, you know what it's like. It's a cut through, and that's all I'm going to say. But there's approximately a half a mile between the light at Dunwoody Village Parkway and Mount Vernon Road and the light at Mount Vernon Road and Mount Vernon Way, which is into my neighborhood. There are 3 residential streets that cover that border that try to make left and right hand turns, which is not easy. We have school buses, we have special needs school buses, we have the commuter traffic, we have walkers from Dunwoody High School. We have their cars. They play sports in the afternoon. We have 2 elementary schools. It's very crowded there. I appreciate the idea of having the home. I think it's needed, but why in that spot? And for the life of me, I can't believe we're going to regulate who comes to see them. I mean, there's medical personnel, there's deliveries, there's housekeeping, they're just the owners coming in and out, their maintenance. What else can I say? One more thing on impervious surfaces. The gentleman that spoke first had on his presentation plus or minus 0.38 acres. Somebody, where's that coming from? I mean, has the land been surveyed? I don't know. But the property at a half an acre is 21,780 square feet. If the house is 6,800 square feet, that's the footprint. I saw a deck off the back. I don't know if that's included in the footprint. And the parking areas, I don't know if that's included. That's a lot of impervious surfaces. That property sits higher than mine, and my neighbor Gina said a few minutes ago that we have had problems with runoff water from that property for years. I don't know what the city's going to do about the runoff water. That's all I got to say, and I thank you so much.
Thank you very much. At this time, this is the final public comment card that I have, but we will entertain any other takers that maybe haven't submitted a card. Betty Fendrick, please.
Betty Fendrick. I live in Dunwoody Close, which isn't adjacent to the property. It's a couple of miles away, but I pass by it frequently, and I feel that, like the others have said, ditto, it's just way too big. I haven't heard anyone say that they've had a family member in any type of these care facilities. Well, my mother was in every type of care facility, and I applaud people who want to undertake that. But I've never seen a personal care home, which is one of the lower levels of care, on a lot that small for a facility that size. They're usually much larger grounds. It's to the benefit of the population that lives there for many reasons, and I won't repeat the traffic and all of that. So I just wanted to say that I have been in and out of a lot of those facilities, and I have a healthcare background, and it just doesn't seem appropriate to me. And having a large vegetative structure in front of it does not seem congruous with the look and feel of our community. And I think my other big note is that I don't know how the planning commission, this lovely young lady here that was speaking, how they could not foresee, because I wrote this down, that they don't foresee extra traffic. And how can you limit a loved one coming to see your loved one that you've put into this facility? You're telling me one person a day can only come and visit by one appointment? It's not going to be like that. Not with an aging population of people that have healthcare needs. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
My name is Sue Ellis. From the very beginning, I've been concerned about the parking. Let me tell you, one of the first red flags that you hear about when you age and you get to be my age and you start thinking about nursing facilities is you have to surprise them. You have to show up and see the facility. I don't know about this appointment to come see a loved one. I really am concerned about the parking. We went through several meetings, and it seemed like we were very much assured that this would be 4 spaces. And then we get to this point and there's a variance for more. I just believe it's going to be a lot more cars and parking than we suspect. And I don't know what you do about that when everyone's stacked up in the driveway.
Thank you very much. All right, that will conclude opposition comment. There were some minutes reserved for proponents and the applicant. Mr. Washington, if you care to join us again.
So just briefly, want to note that this special land use permit does not introduce commercial. It just is specific to this property, permitting the individuals to be residents in this facility. So it does not introduce a use that could have runaway effects. Additionally, as the professional staff has noted, we're not asking for any variance in terms of building. So hypothetically, absent the residents, they could build this facility on this property, and there wouldn't be any community input. The question right now is really about the residents and having individuals present. Relatedly, the reason why Roman, the staff person, will be living there is he's a professional. So it's not just someone making it a home and adding residents. It's a healthcare professional who's choosing to make their home also a facility for elder care, for senior care. So you have a licensed professional family that that's making their home a facility that is safe and a great place to develop for the community. On the note of parking, we requested the additional parking, but to the extent that it and it seems like it is a question for the neighborhood, we're happy to follow the professional staff's recommendation without the variance. Important to note, the individuals that are in this facility are receiving excessive or extra care, so they're not driving. So there's not going to be additional parking necessary for the residents to that question. Ms. Copeland has a model when it comes to visitors of doing it by appointment only. That helps things run seamlessly and smoothly. It has worked for over 2 decades when it comes to her managing her business. As you may note in some of the letters of support, you don't have folks saying, you know, I had terrible experience with Legacy Care Matters. You have people that said I had a great experience either working there or being part of that. And we can supplement that to the extent that that wasn't additionally part of the record. What's important to note finally, again, I know that there is a lot of questions about the size of the facility. Important to note that this facility, again, comports with all the standards in terms of necessary setbacks, and the vegetative buffer that we're adding at the front was in conjunction with the professional staff of the city to make sure that it fit in with the community, and also did not provide an eye intrusion for the community. With that, I'll pause to see if any members of the commission have questions.
Thank you. We almost certainly will have questions. What we typically do is kind of go around the horn.
Perfect.
And yes.
I know that there was someone else that wanted to speak in support as well, so I'm hopefully I didn't use the rest of the time.
Paul, if we've got the time, we'd be happy to hear them.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I needed to add one more thing to some of the comments that I've been hearing tonight. I want you to be very clear on what an independent living facility is and a residential living facility such as the one being proposed. Oftentimes you will see in Georgia that they have a assisted living component, and they may have some units surrounding that unit where individuals are more independent and do drive. This will not be the scenario, number one. Number two, we just are on the downside of COVID. It still exists. There are still some issues there. They have already instituted into the previous facility appointment-based situations only for that reason. So we're not having large groups of people coming from the outside to speak to individuals that they want to, check on because of COVID. So it's not just by appointment only for that reason. It's to be methodical about what we're bringing into the home because there are other seniors there. So if you have a structure in place, then you can make sure everybody's as safe as possible. The final thing is I've heard a couple comments about the residents being concerned about the previous existing issues with the building. It sounds like it was already kind of an eyesore and that there were some sewage issues. My assumption is that if they're rebuilding, it's going to be up to code, and that would help whatever the issues were of the previous people that were there. So I just want you to keep that in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comment from any proponents at this point? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close comment. And at this point, we will go around the horn here. And I want to start all the way to my right with Commissioner Brown. Do you have any questions or comments? I want to give everybody a chance to ask their questions or comments, and then we'll entertain a motion and hopefully send folks on their way. Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, I have, I think a couple for the applicant and one for staff. I guess I'll start with staff. I want to go back to the discrepancy on the acreage of the site. as well as the concern that was raised about impervious surface. I'm assuming that the impervious surface requirement is based on the 0.5 acres, and I just want to feel comfortable that the impervious, that we're sure that it's 0.5 acres, so that if we find out later it's 0.38, we don't have to go back and recalculate impervious surfaces.
Yeah, allow me to share my screen and hopefully this will clarify that for you. So I'm just going to share the Dunwoody Smart Map, and this is a tool that I use often when I'm, residents call me with questions about, hey, how large is my property? What's my zoning? This is our Dunwoody Smart Map, and it's open to the public, so anyone can use this. And there's a measurement tool. So I'm just going to use our measurement tool to just demonstrate the acreage. Just to make sure it's showing up on the screen there. So these orange lines, these are the property lines. This is the parcel data. The data comes from DeKalb County property appraisers. Most counties have this property data available to the public. Similar tools exist, in Fulton County as well. So it's something that a lot of planners use. Scott, I know you're a planner. You've probably used this tool before. But essentially, it's obviously not a survey, but you can see from here, the approximate area is 0.5 acres. And this is the easiest way to do it. I can look at the survey a little bit closer, but I think this is a good.
Yeah, I think that
reflection of the
answers
size
my
of the
question.
property. Yeah.
And I know it's showing 0.47, but I'm assuming there's a little bit of a margin of error as to
On
where you
GIS,
drew the.
there's typically a small margin.
But
so-
as far as you're concerned, the survey records, the GIS, the city has the best available information is that this is a 0.5 acre site.
Yes.
And that the impervious surfaces that you guys have asked for not exceeding are based on that 0.5 acres.
Yeah, additionally, and just one other tool, the DeKalb appraiser website, if you go here, the deeded acreage is 0.5 acres according to the property appraiser. So those are some tools, again, that are publicly accessible and easy to use. So.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that
Mhm.
clarification. For the applicant, I guess I want to understand a little bit more about, like, I definitely appreciate that this is going to act as a residential use in nature. There's not going to be a commercial kitchen. There's not going to be a dumpster, grease pit or anything like that. What type of deliveries will be made and how frequently? What kind of supplies, food deliveries, things of that nature? And then I also want to get a little clarification. My assumption, understanding what this personal care home is, this is not a medical facility, correct? Like there's no medical procedures taking place. There's not anything that is kind of medical in nature. It's only caretaking for day-to-day needs, not medical needs.
This is not a medical facility. This is a personal care facility. There's activity happening, it is consistent with regular medicine and the like. So there's no procedures or are that happening. In terms of deliveries, obviously you don't have a crystal ball, but are there going to be large commercial deliveries on a regular basis? No. Again, this is a residential facility, so we can consistent with any other residence with 7 individuals. If you think about it, you can have a house with 3,500 square feet and having 7 people live there. So in this instance, we have 7 stable residents and a one individual. I know folks with a lot smaller houses that have individuals that so delivery of traffic. These are 7 individuals again who are not driving, and the deliveries will be consistent with that. Do I have a frequency absent? The building being there, no, and I don't know that we have a consistent amount of regular deliveries with these facilities.
And in this size facility, there won't be catering trucks and things like that. The people that actually live there that run the business will cook as if it was a family of 7 kids or 7 older adults. So they're just going to be cooking, so that the movement that you see might be going to the grocery store and coming back with a larger volume of groceries versus a catering truck. So that's what you're gonna see in terms of deliveries. I mean, maybe during the building process, there might be something going on, but there's not gonna be laundry services picking up, dry cleaning and dropping off. There's not gonna be any, catering trucks to come in and bring food. There's not gonna be any of that. The state does require that facilities allow seniors to have activity-based services. So for example, maybe one day they'll all get in a vehicle and go to the local play. Maybe they'll take them to the park and have a picnic. I mean, obviously they want them to get out into the community, be as involved as they can based on their limited mobility. But for the most part, there won't be any regular activity outside of deliveries if you're thinking in context of that.
And then can we clarify the employees? So there will be the one resident employee and then one additional employee that does not live there, correct?
One resident employee, and then as a general matter, there will be one employee that will come in on a shift basis. Now, that is not to say that at some point in time, and enrollment won't be there at the same time with an additional person, but as a general matter, it will be one individual there 24/7 and additional shift worker that comes in and out.
Let me give you kind of an example. So for example, if it's Anna and her husband at home and a PRN person per se, and Anna decides she needs to run the errands to go to the store to pick up Mr. Evans' medications and Miss Annie's nose spray hypothetically, she may leave and want to make sure that the oversight is consistent. So she may leave and that PRN person may come in while she's gone running errands for the actual facility. Something like that. That's kind of common.
I mean, I think this gets to the core of the fact that this is a residential. If you think about it, a family of 7 would be 2 parents and 5 kids, like my sister, who has 5 boys. And so in that instance, you have folks coming in and out and Amazon deliveries, except for the fact that my nephew drives. So there were probably more cars at my sister's house and her house, like, a couple of thousand square feet. I probably should have a gym. But in any event, this is not an instance where you have a bunch of people in and out for various different reasons.
Understood. Thank you for the clarifications.
We're going to go around the horn, so I'm not sure, but Commissioner Shin will decide.
Yeah, Commissioner Brown covered a lot of my questions. I would just probably want some clarification on providing a drainage plan or what the water quality, stormwater kind of solutions will look like on the plan, like the site plan. And I know that's something that's usually handled, I guess, once this goes through the process, but I would at least want to see that and see that it's addressing the surrounding drainage basin and it's not having a negative impact to any of the surrounding properties. But that's okay.
So to your point, I think some of the residents mentioned that the previous property, obviously Anna and Roman first property that didn't have a foundation. So that no telling what other type of drainage issues were the cause of the problems over the years. Putting a new facility that is required to meet code standards for the city inevitably will improve drainage situations because you can't build a building and not install proper drainage. It will not get past the city's permitting. It will not get past the certificate of occupancy. It will not get past the state regulations that are required before this facility can take on any individual. So, as much as there is an issue about this being an eyesore, in fact, approving this will probably improve the eyesore. You have a significant investment on this property and a significant investment in landscaping and a significant investment to improve the infrastructure, to reduce the drainage and runoff issues. And, as it's noted, sitting here and not approving it means that you are left with a partially built structure with drainage from the 1970s and that has not been updated. Improving this means that you get a new facility with 2023 code and code of compliance that I think would resolve all those things. You're correct, though, that normally that process doesn't happen because this is the kind of first bite of the apple to say we can do this, and then the city's professional staff goes through a very rigorous process in permitting to make sure that it's compliant. So it might solve more problems than it creates that the community is objective to.
Yeah, thank you. If this gets deferred, I would want that to be included in the next submittal. And then my other point is just another comment as far as one of the conditions that the staff wanted was the streetscape improvement required by the Public Works Director. I would just want to hear more about what our Public Works Director would be considering and what the future plans along Mount Vernon that might impact this property, the surrounding areas like roadway or sidewalk or anything like that.
So I know that the Public Works Department is considering doing a streetscape project along Mount Vernon. I personally don't know the exact details. It is a different department. My understanding is that it's typically involves a wider sidewalk than the typical 3 to 5 foot interior residential sidewalk, because it is more of a major road. And it involves street trees and street lighting.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay, Commissioner Edmondson, please.
I actually had a follow-up for Madeline for staff. Sorry. And it's a follow-up to Commissioner Shin's question. Is there anything that the Planning Commission or that staff could put in that would require as a condition some sort of an assessment of the topography and drainage to make sure that that happens ahead of the permitting and so forth? Is there anything that we could add in as a condition?
Mhm. So you are certainly welcome to add conditions related to stormwater mitigation. If that were the case, I would say we should consider deferral. That way city staff can meet with the applicant's engineer so that we can discuss strategies for runoff mitigation and be specific about what would be most effective on this property. In general, I would say our code does address this situation. The code would require runoff mitigation, and that means, improved, excuse me, the technical engineering terms escape me, but essentially water quality and runoff reduction, that's the word. So our code already requires those items.
Okay, yeah, I think as comment, it would be helpful if we defer to have that in just for the community, because that is a big piece of what we heard tonight. And then the second question I had is for the applicant. And just wanting to get a better understanding of what the builds will actually be inside the home. So some of the comments we heard tonight is that it's going to be built and it's going to be more of a commercial property. It's not going to be able to be resold as a residential home. Can you talk a little bit about what the actual spaces inside would be like compared to a home versus some sort of a assisted living commercial facility?
So as far as I understand it, and you don't go to law school for engineering, so, but as far as I understand it, the facility will be residential in nature in terms of like the look and feel as if it is a residential facility. Obviously, the interior will have to comply with state standards when it comes to the width of doors in the event of emergency circumstances. It'll have to be equipped with any number of safety requirements. But if the idea is that you open the door and you get a stale hospital-like environment, that is not the intention. The whole intention of the building is to look and feel as if it is a very large home, very wide doors with a very nice kitchen, and in spaces, open spaces that can cope with a large home again, with large common spaces. I want to make sure that I make this point very, very pointedly, is that in terms of a land use discussion, this is about building kind of outside of the building, but everything inside the building has to comply with a number of different state and federal regulations, and they are very, very stringent about what is required. And if Ms. Copeland hadn't been complying with them, she wouldn't be in a position to expand. Important to note that she doesn't advertise for business. She doesn't have billboards. What she has is folks that have experienced her and recommend her. She has a waiting list. So waiting list of residents that want to stay there in a residential facility. And I mentioned earlier, the concern here is that it's a commercial facility. What this is would be equivalent to a very exclusive residential home that's large and nice for residents to age in place.
Okay, that's it from me.
And may I add, with the waiting list, the 5 individuals, families that are interested do live in this immediate area. So they're not coming from, so it is community based. The whole purpose of the home is to service the immediate community, not people coming from all over. That's not ideal. She does have 5 families that are kind of waiting to see what's going to happen in this community that are interested in possibly having their loved ones live there. So it's already a benefit because it's so limited in nature already.
Thank you. Commissioner Harris.
All right, couple of questions. The first one I would like to, Madeline, thank you for bringing up the map to show the difference. Their site plan does show 0.38 though. I would like to, on that note, if we defer, I would like to get some solid numbers so that all of the information and the data we're seeing is clear, because we're being asked to make some decisions and some approvals are being made on numbers, and numbers matter. The next question I have, and this would be for the applicant, I believe, let's talk about fencing for a minute. So a couple of questions, backyard fence and then front yard fence. I know we have some city standards in front yard fence, and so I'll ask my question about that in a minute, but what is the fencing plan right now for the property?
As I understand, the property will be fenced in the back. Front, it would have a vegetative buffer, as opposed to having a fence or a gate. You have natural trees that will grow, essentially, to create a natural buffer.
Between, okay, so I'm taking a peek at the property right now. So then let's chat about trees for a minute with construction. What's going to happen with the trees? How many trees are anticipated to be removed from the property? How many trees will be remaining? And then I was looking on the site plan. I'm trying to, in particular, focus on the trees in the front yard that would provide buffer for the neighbors from the parking lot.
Yep. Yes. So, as I understand it, we have 4 trees, and then I think that we will be planting 1.2 trees, at least, I guess, large ones. When it comes to the vegetative buffer, those aren't necessarily trees, though. Those are shrubs, so I don't think they're classified. That would obviously, have to bump up against. There will be 50 shrubs planted along the front.
So along the front isn't what I'm focusing on. I appreciate trying to block all the people, for the people, or block, well, it's a double, right? It provides residents inside greenery, but also people driving by. What about the people who live next door though? And so that when they're in their yard, they're not looking at a parking lot. So I'm specifically focused on the side yards and what that greenery looks like.
So,
Because I see on the east side and in the front, I see what looks like shrubs. What about the western side yard?
Erica, do you mind? I can actually pull up the
Yeah,
code real quick
please.
to show you the transition yard buffers. That was a condition recommended by staff after they submitted their site plan, so it's not currently reflected there. But I will pull up the zoning ordinance just to show you what the transition yard standards are.
I think that would be good for everyone to see. I understand what the standards are. I'm wondering what is being planned. So specifically from this applicant.
Like I said, currently the site plan isn't updated, so we're recommending the transition yard to be shown along the side and rear property lines.
Okay. So that would be something else. Just personally, I like seeing, and y'all know this about me, I like seeing a whole package before I feel good about something, or feel any way about something. Okay,
This is
fences,
sorry.
trees.
This is just the transition yard too, just for reference. And it does include, like I said, trees. And so that buffer would be recommended along the side and rear property lines.
All right, my note on that would be that I would want something to provide, I'm thinking thuja, also, or shrubbery on the bottom, because at this point, if I was a neighbor, I don't think I'd want a see-through fence for a parking lot. And so that brings my next question. We're looking for 4 to 6 parking spaces. This is a residential home, or it's supposed to feel like a residential home. How do you include a garage for the workers or the people living there? Is there a garage included already and so then why not? Because if it's a residential home, if you had a 3-car parking garage, which would be, I think, commensurate with a home this size, you would immediately cut your asked parking in half. So talk to me about the decision for not having a garage on the property.
So as I mentioned earlier, we're happy to, walk away from the request for the additional parking to the extent that that is an issue. That's not there. But the focus with the facility is not necessarily to have parking for residents that aren't going to drive in terms of the garage. Garage will be like an everyday use. Someone is leaving and entering and exiting in a way. If you have to have 24-hour, an individual there for 24 hours, living there, and as supervising that might need to drive, they would need a car on site, but they wouldn't necessarily need a car that they need to put in the garage. So I think that the focus is if there is square footage to be maximized in the facility, it is for the living and the enjoyment of the residents and for whatever functional needs are for the professional staff there. Setting that aside, you know, even if it was, you know, we obviously are stepping away from the requirement and ask for additional parking. This would be equivalent of if someone decided not to have a very large 3-car garage, but have a large driveway. As was noted, the earlier version had a U-shaped driveway to comply with the requirements of the city of a single entrance and exit. We got rid of that U-shaped driveway, which might have comported a little bit more cleanly with a parking lot. And so this change and this amendment and request is only because, you know, we have to have a single entrance and exit. Because originally it was a U-shaped parking lot with 3 parking spots on this side, 3 parking spots on that side, which might have looked less like a parking lot, more like a, you know, a horseshoe. But again, to comply with the requirements and the staff's request, we focus the parking spot toward in the front. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It doesn't necessarily solve the parking lot look, which I think is a concern of mine. My next question will be in the rendering here. I'm assuming that fountain is no longer, okay.
That the rendering is just a conceptual design. Obviously, the front of the building, the front fascia is consistent with the actual plan that was, I think, Exhibit B for you guys as part of the application packet. You know, it would be potentially nice to have a fountain, but I don't know that that is going to be as part of the plan.
Okay. And then let's see. So and the reason why I would recommend actually against the fountain is if the intent is to blend in, having a beautiful fountain looks great in front of a museum. I'm not so sure that necessarily comports with a residential neighborhood.
I definitely think that they're willing to make some provisions in
Design.
regards to that. I don't think that's a make or break for the owner.
And also on the site plan, the fountain isn't reflected. Those are just renderings. Those are conceptual elevations. The site plan does not reflect a fountain. In fact, I think on the site plan and the survey, you have kind of a you know, our set of plans for things like that. So we're happy to not have a fountain.
Okay. And then my last question, I mirror the drainage, just know I have questions about that, is why 7? Why not 4 or 5? And I want to say I greatly appreciate what you're doing. I remember visiting my great grandmother in a group care home. I visited my grandfather in one as well before he had to move to a nursing facility. So I see great value in this. Neither of them were in large facilities. They had actually 2 or 3 residents in theirs. So why 7? Why push the envelope on the side? Is it a financial? Is it what's?
Okay, I don't think it's so much financial. I think, you know, when you think about populations and you think about the community, right? One of the things that you find with seniors statistically is you want them to be interactive. There's a lot of seniors that live at home that don't have very much interaction outside of the family. If you have a family-like environment, but you have some versatility along that way, then you have some interactions. Everybody is not going to maybe have the same type of issue, but you may have 2 people that have this that can relate, 2 that are a little bit higher functioning that can interact, and then you have others that are pretty dependent that are limited on what they can do. So having that versatility allows for, let's say, mom and dad to be able to have somewhat of a community, right? So it's like going to an adult day health center that might not be available to you, but you need your parent and your loved one to intermingle with people. Having 7 people, it's just to be able to create that, but to also to be able to provide services to people that clearly need it in Dunwoody. I mean, the aging population, from what I saw and the research I did, is pretty high. And I understand that the idea of buying a home is to stay in it, but the truth of the matter is we age and things happen. And so you may have to transition. Would you like to transition from the 30-year home that you thought you were going to live in down the street? Or would you like to transition into a place outside because there's nothing available? It's like saying to the community, well, we don't really want the seniors here because we have a home-like atmosphere that we'd like to sustain. So therefore, we're gonna put mom, dad, and Uncle Ben on the outside of the area in which we decided we were gonna live for 30 years. Do you understand the concept?
Yeah.
And there aren't any homes here, maybe for the reason they're in that has been stated, but I think that the seniors have a right to exist in the community in any city, in any county in the state of Georgia, and to deny somebody that, to me, is unfathomable, because I'm going through it now. And for somebody to tell me, hey, you can't have your dad here, I don't know, I just have a real issue with that. I feel like it's a denial of their rights.
So I've got a couple things that I'll point to that. The 2040 comprehensive plan notes that in the city, there is a number of different residential houses, and there is the actual land or space to potentially develop in this type of residential facility. That there is land. Let me say this to make sure that I'm being precise. There's probably lots and lands where you could potentially develop a site, any number of lots in the city, but the inventory question, the number of places, number of residents is limited when it comes to focusing on senior population. This particular home provides an opportunity to have what the city's comprehensive plan, not ours, said should be novel ideas to address the issue of senior housing. The state regulation says that a personal care facility like this could have as many as 15 people, right? So she could conceivably go to a larger lot, build a house twice this size, and have 15 residents in it. Instead, what you have is a existing residential lot and the reconstruction of a new house, larger house, and half the amount of residents that she potentially could ask for based on state regulations. That isn't kind of obviously buttoned up against the city of Dunwoody's code. But important to note, these residents will have twice the level of care based on having the reduced number in this particular facility. So, to surmise it, if you're going to approve a personal care facility in this city, this is the type of corporate citizen, this type of person that you want to have running a facility. A track record of success, a track record of doing it, neighbors within 10 feet saying, I've gotten to know this person over this process, I would welcome them as a neighbor, a significant level of investment that would potentially solve some of the infrastructure issue, and someone that spent 6 months of due diligence, really working hard to make sure that this is the right property. I get it, the residents have a right to have objections, but this person is putting up, significant personal capital to provide a place for Dunwoody citizens to stay. So,
Well, I appreciate that. So one quick comment to think on. The reason why I'm asking about size is, remember, you are moving onto a residential street. Those residences are limited to, I believe, a maximum impervious coverage of 35%. By the nature of getting the SLUP, you move up to 60%. That's a significant change for residents who are living next door. And so while I appreciate it, just some thoughts in terms of, while we're talking about compassion, I think it goes both ways, is when residents are looking at a parking lot in their residential view, that is something that's coming up for them. While they want to embrace the concept, some of the commercialization of this concept in the residential neighborhood, I think, makes it a little hard to swallow, which is, I'm going based on what I heard tonight. So I think my question is there a way to, no one said they're against providing this service. The feedback you've heard is on the aesthetics and then the impervious coverage, mostly. Some concern over traffic, but I'm a mom of 4 kids, a cottage driver, and another one who's about to get her license. We got cars. So I hear that, and we have Amazon way too often in our home. Is there a way to soften? And so that's my question for the applicant. Is there a way to soften? Is there a way to amend that? You don't have to answer that. I'm just providing that feedback.
Yeah.
And that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Cameron.
I have a question for Madeline. Is there any grandfathering issue with the remaining slab and walls that are on the property? Like, are they going to be grandfathered into any reduction in code requirements?
Do you mean, is the foundation that's what
Richard's shaking his head, so.
answered my question. No, so because this is a redevelopment, there's no grandfathering. It starts from the baseline of the code.
Okay. And I just have a couple comments. The size I understand is a concern of people. I live in the Branches, and as I walk through the neighborhood with my dog in the morning, during the day, I see a number of smaller houses that have been torn down and mansions have been built. So I don't think that that's an uncommon thing to happen in Dunwoody, that people just build bigger houses. I also appreciate that this use is part of the comprehensive plan for the city, that we want to have more ability for aging in place. And like you, my parents are in their 80s, and I'm thinking I'm going to call Anna and get on her wait list, because we don't have that many options, because I've been looking. So the setbacks are met, the city's requirements have been met, and I appreciate the work that's been done on this project.
Thank you. Commissioner Gordon?
So really all of my questions have been answered with the previous commissioner's questions. But I would like to agree that, you know, the fountain takes away from the neighborhood feel, and without it, we could probably decrease the impervious footprint a little bit.
Yeah, that could certainly not be an option.
Yeah.
Yes, so if I understood your comment correctly, it's like decreasing the parking and decreasing the impervious surface, yes. And to the note of the question about the fencing, Ms. Copeland added the fencing recently, and to make sure that they provided the neighbors privacy, and is happy to do that, to provide a fence around the property that, you know, addresses that concern. I think Ms. Harris had that comment. So I wanted to make sure I address that. And I'm sorry, Commissioner Gordon, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay. That's pretty much all I have.
Okay, thank you. I just, I've got a couple of questions. I'm probably going to hit both staff as well as the applicant. Madeline, we had one of the comments against an opponent suggested that the law as written, a project like this could not comply with the law as written with regard to people making it their residence as well as a personal care home. I believe that comment was made by Mr. De La Rete, if I'm not mistaken. Can you address that?
Yes, so based on my conversation between me and Paul, Paul's the planning and zoning manager, just for people here. So we have already had that discussion, and we don't see that there's an exclusivity. The household is allowed by right, and then through the SLUP process, we're also adding the, it would add the use of a personal care home, but that doesn't negate the uses that are already allowed by right. Some other uses that are already allowed by right, I mean, there's very few of them in a single family district, but, you know, for example, like community gardens are, you know, permitted as of right. So the approval of a special land use permit doesn't negate the, you know, rights of, you know, what's allowed there already. If that makes any sense.
No, I think it does. And let me then also ask, because the residential component appears to be a matter of right, as of what I believe you've indicated just now.
For single family households, yes.
It would be possible then for the owner applicant to move their entire family in, correct? So if they were to have theoretically a family of 2 or 4, that would not count against the total number of residents living in the facility. Is that your understanding, that they could do that as a matter of right?
Yes, that is a matter of right. You are allowed to have your household there.
Okay,
Well, can I add to that?
you sure?
Okay. When the state comes in and looks at from a regulatory standpoint, if I'm the regulator, let's say I'm working at the state level, I'm coming in to regulate whether or not they can be licensed and for how many, and they've submitted everything. I'm looking at each bedroom. I'm looking at what the use is for each bedroom, and then I'm looking at where are the staff going to be. So if she has, let's say, 7 other people, and she can't show me where these 7 people are going to be based on the pre-existing layout. So these staff can't share bedrooms. I mean, the family can't share bedrooms. They can't create another bedroom that doesn't exist for this new found family that's coming to move in, there are rules in place for that. So when I come toward the facility, before I make the final decision, I'm asking those questions and I'm making sure that there's a clear divide. They're giving me a floor plan to tell me exactly where the family's gonna be versus the residents. That doesn't change. Majority of the time, it just doesn't change.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't approve it.
So to that note, there's a kind of the threshold between the city requirements and code enforcement. So yes, by right, hypothetically, she could move a family in by right based on the city of Dunwoody, but then they run into the state and federal regulations that say you have to prioritize your residents. And so once you reach the capacity based on state and federal regulations, you can't move your family into the facility because the residents have to have the right, and then the facility focuses on professional staff only. So by that, if the underlying kind of concern is you get this house and you have a family of 6 living there and you have 7 residents, how does that work? That can't happen based on state and federal regulations that would prevent that. And so in fact, quite frankly, the city of Dunwoody wouldn't have very many enforcement regulations. The state and federal government are very clear about those regulations. And in order for her to keep her license to do business, she would have to comply with that. And again, Ms. Copeland has 20 years of doing this and has over that 2-decade period not indicated that the desire is to have a bait and switch. If you will.
Oh, and I'm not even thinking of
not-
bait and
not-
switch. What I'm suggesting is that if her son, who appears to be one of the individuals tasked with running this potential facility, if her son marries or has a significant other, that significant other by right would be allowed to move into that space, provided they were sharing a bedroom?
Hypothetically, yes.
Yeah, okay, so
I mean, yeah, if the son moved in the bedroom with his parents hypothetically, but there wouldn't really be any space for anybody else. How realistic is that?
I
I
think
mean,
that-
with all due respect.
I think that the concern here is that a younger facilities manager moves in their family, then, how do you square the circle? How do you dot the I when it comes to the actual residential care facility and the son, the individual's right as a single family dweller? Again, important to note that yes, there are things by right, but this is obviously a professionally run operation and it will comply with all state and federal regulations.
okay, and what about with regard to residents? Are we anticipating that the residents are single individuals as well? And how do they work the head count with regard to, for example, a husband and wife interested in aging in place together? Is that 2 of the proposed head count?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be 2 of the proposed headcount.
Okay, and so would the expectation be then that they each occupy their own room in this scenario?
No, the way it works is the state requires that you have 80 square foot per person per room, not to include any closet space or any foyer. So if I'm an auditor and I come out and see that you want 2 people in that room and it's not 160 square livable space, it's not happening. So husband would be next to wife in a different room and they would count as 2. So they wouldn't be one and the same just because they're married.
And on our balance, I say you could stop them from, spending time
Right,
together. but
they have rights. They have
they would
rights.
be in 2 different locations for all intents and purposes.
Sure, no, I'm just trying to understand how the counts
So
work.
yeah, there wouldn't be like 6 couples in 6 rooms, and that would be an equivalent of, because they have the space, they still have to meet the square footage in place, and that always stays, that floor plan always stays with the state. And the regulator will come out and actually measures the room. So he could give me a structural plan, and as a regulator, I'm still gonna go out and measure the rooms.
Okay, and I believe I heard you say with regard to the parking, that it would be a consideration. I didn't hear a guarantee, and I'm not asking for a guarantee. I heard that it would be a consideration to bring the parking space count back down such that a concurrent variance would not be needed. Did I hear that?
Guarantee that we will reduce the parking.
That's exactly
that is-
right.
That is not a problem. I mean, this goes to the point that we're making. The goal is, I think we check the box in front of use, but the individual that you're inviting into your community is ever diligent when it comes to making sure that she's a good neighbor that our residents can use. And so, I can't emphasize that enough. I recognize that there's some trepidation, but she has made every effort to, meet every concern. In fact, by the time we jumped into it, she had done a lot of the community meetings and the survey and significant investment. So we jumped into what was a moving ship of somebody who at her heart just wants to make sure that she does the right thing by the residents. And so, by her residents in the facility, but also the community. So we will I'll pause there.
And she hired us, so that helps. I mean, I have a background in it and he's a lawyer, so I mean, she was taking it seriously. A lot of people do these meetings and don't think twice to hire anybody like me or him for this purpose. She really wanted to make sure she could try to appease as many people and get this process done and have it be done reasonably.
And I will say this, it is Valentine's Day. My wife and I
Yeah.
plans and everything else, but I am here for a reason because Ms. Copeland is worth it and it's worth that investment of time and effort. So I'm happy to be here because she's that type of person. And I don't say that about all my friends. Unfortunately.
And I'm
All right, thank you. I have nothing further. I think at this time it's appropriate we move to commission comment, commission discussion. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and I'll start to my left this time. And do we have any comments to talk about amongst ourselves? And then, of course, I'm going to look to the team to form a motion based on whatever our pleasure is. So Commissioner Gordon, any comments to the commission? Would you hop on the mic, please?
Sorry, I'm a little confused about whether we should defer or not. I mean, I like everything I've heard, but do we need to get all that in writing before we can move forward? I
Well,
don't know.
my position on that, I would suggest is if there are things that you believe should be in writing, now would be an appropriate time to ask for them, or if you don't have your head around them because they're not necessarily fully formed, then perhaps a deferral would be the right thing to do.
So, for example, if you wanted to codify something, you could approve with the, and then you would put that in your recommendation, or you could deny because of.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Cameron.
Sorry, I made my comments before.
That's okay.
I
No,
realized
that-
that wasn't necessarily right, but a couple of other things. I live not far from this house and have been by it, and many times before when the prior owner was there were 5, 6, 7 cars parked in front of that house all the time. So the 4 parking spaces that staff has recommended, I don't think is that much of a stretch. And as I mentioned before, Mr. Shortle doesn't want this in his backyard. Would we want this next to us? Because it's part of the city's comprehensive plan, I think it's incumbent on us to appreciate that and to acknowledge that not everybody is a single family living in our community. Those are my comments.
Okay, Commissioner Harris.
Just so the commission knows where my head is, I love the idea of it. I share concern over not forced parking spaces, but the parking lot type of situation that is shown in the documents we have. So that's something that stands out as a concern to me. I'm curious about the 6,900 square foot property in terms of 7 residents. And I think one of us mentioned wanting to know what does that look like? What would a typical layout be? Especially hearing that a residence, a bedroom only has to be 80 square feet. So I'm pretty sure my kids would kick my tail with that small of a bedroom. So I'd like to know some more details just from the living perspective. I'd like to know more about the specific fencing plan. Is it going to be an 8-foot privacy fence through the backyard? And then in terms of more on the front yard as well. And then the drainage. So there's some outstanding things. I'd also like to see the numbers rectified. So where I am is more, I think we have some time to get some more pieces put together and to allow the applicant to consider perhaps what the front yard impervious space might look like.
Thank you. Commissioner Edmondson.
First, I want to thank everybody for being here. It's great to see so many people engaged. So thank you for making the time on Valentine's Day for that. I agree that the concept, I think, is noteworthy, especially with aging parents myself. So I greatly understand where that's coming from. I would agree with Commissioner Harris that I'd like to see a little bit more detail, especially in regards to the drainage. I know myself, I've had to invest a lot of money in drainage over the past year, so I definitely understand residents' concerns. I would like to see that incorporated somehow, either in the conditions or within the plan, how that would get addressed with a little bit more clarity before making a recommendation, but I appreciate everyone being here tonight.
Commissioner Shin?
I mean, I have nothing new to add to the discussion that the other commissioners have added, and I think it might be a good thing to entertain a deferral.
Commissioner Brown?
Okay. First, I want to say I'm reviewing this both objectively and as a fellow resident. So I want you to know I've read all of your thoughts and concerns on both sides. All the letters that have been sent, as well as what you've said today. I'm also trying to be very objective at the same time, looking at a lens of also being a professional city planner as well as a transportation planner. So just with that context, I want to talk first about the use and just kind of reiterate or remind that this is the house itself. There was a point made earlier, and I would invite staff to correct me if I'm off on this, but if this were coming through just as a residence of the size that is being proposed, the heights, the setbacks, the keeping the original footprint and all of those things, this house would pass. It wouldn't even come to us. So I want to say that first. So as a structure, this would pass through and be approved. But what we're asked to look at in addition to that today is the use that's being asked for, which is this memory care facility. And I do understand the concerns, but to me, and I'm also trying to look at this as if I lived right next door as well. To me, thinking about however many elderly people living inside the house, like what kind of impact would that have on me as a resident? And I don't see really any impact. I mean, I can think of larger families that live in Dunwoody from when I grew up in Dunwoody that had 7, 8, 9 kids. I would think that would have a far greater impact than what we're talking about here. I personally don't have an issue with the use. I do agree it's a very large house, but it's according to the codes and the zoning regulations that we have in place in the city of Dunwoody. And so if we're going to think about denying it based on those grounds, then that's going against the actual code. So I'm just trying to be objective there on that aspect of it. Traffic, I also hear the concerns. I sit in that traffic on Mount Vernon as somebody that drops off kids every morning and gets to work. I know it's really bad. I sit in it all the time. I don't see this as a traffic generator. And you have to look at the differential between a residential home versus another type of use. And I don't see this creating that many more trips on top of what a normal residence would be. In fact, probably similar to what a similar size family in that type of size house would be. This is not an office or anything like that that's going to produce a lot of traffic. And then I just want to speak real quick about deferment. It seems like a lot of you all are in favor of deferment. I would just ask, what are we getting out of that deferment? If we come back next month and spend another couple hours here tonight, or like we did tonight, what are the things that we're getting out of it that aren't already in the application and that aren't already in the site plan? Because the fountain, a couple comments have been made about that. The fountain has already not been in the site plan. It's only in the rendering. So, and then I believe the fencing is covered by the required yard that staff is recommending. And then the stormwater, I'm not personally a stormwater expert, but it sounded like from staff's answer that is also going to go according to what the development codes of the city require. So if there's something that we would get out of deferring that we don't have tonight, that's one thing, but I don't want us to just kick the can down the road if we're not gonna get firmer answers than we already have available to us tonight. So that's all.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Brown. At this time, I'm going to ask folks to form a motion, to figure out how we're going to do this. And rather, I'm going to ask folks to form two motions because we need to handle this as both a SLUP and as a concurrent variance. By my read, we could either approve this with staff's recommendations, we could approve it with our own conditions, we could deny it, and we could defer it. But to Commissioner Brown's point, I believe that if we do recommend a deferral, let's enumerate exactly what we want to see. And I will, speaking strictly for myself, I would like to know more about the drainage. I would like to know more because it has been a problem historically with that parcel of land. And I don't think a drainage plan would be that difficult to put together necessarily. And I think it would go a long way to help allay a lot of the concerns about the large jump between 35 and 60% impervious surface. So I'll speak to that as a personal point of concern. So at this point, we kind of know what our options are. So commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Could I ask a real quick clarifying question? If we also want to introduce proposed conditions, would that come with the with our recommendation?
Yeah,
Or motion, I'm sorry.
You would form it as part of your motion and make sure you spike that out so they can be addressed as add-ons and make sure we list them in the minutes as add-ons so we can go back and figure it out. All right, is anybody willing to form a motion for us to entertain?
I would like to move that we approve the SLUP with staff's recommendation for conditions. And are you saying you don't want the parking thing now, the variance now?
Oh, I'm not saying anything. What I'm saying is if we, the concurrent variance, sorry.
That's
We're
separate.
gonna have, that would have to be entertained as a separate motion.
Okay.
So,
I will move that we approve the special land use permit with staff's conditions.
okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Cameron that we approve the SLUP with staff's recommendations. At this time, is there a second for that motion?
I will second that motion, but I'd like to add a couple conditions for consideration.
That would need to be a separate motion.
Okay.
So is there a second for the motion on the table? By my read, that motion does not carry. As such, commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Okay, I will make a motion to approve the special land use permit. I would like to see consideration for a condition that shortens the 2-year allowance before the existing foundation is demolished. I understand the concerns from the community about that being an eyesore. So I would like to see that time length shortened. And, you know, if need be, so say shorten that to a year, and if need be, the applicant can come back for reconsideration if there's some type of hardship. But yes, and otherwise supporting staff's conditions.
May I, before you finalize that motion, may I also, if we've already heard and asked to reduce the parking space and heard a commitment from them to reduce the parking space count, would you consider making that a portion of your motion?
Yes, it would. Sorry, I thought the variance was a separate piece.
Excuse me. You know what? I'll strike that. Thank you. You're right. You're right. Duly noted. Okay, is that the end of your motion? I'm going to restate it to you so everybody can hear it. At this time, Commissioner Brown has moved that we approve SLUP 22-03 with the additional limitation subject to staff's conditions, with the additional limitation that the 2-year allowance for demolition be struck to 1 year.
Correct.
Okay, there's the motion. Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Cameron, was that you seconding? Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. At this time, we can debate it and discuss. What do you think? What's your pleasure?
I have one question. Is the 1 year feasible based off of permitting? Are we saying, okay, I'm seeing a yes, I'm seeing nod, so.
It's possible to permit.
Any other discussion? Yes.
So we can't add a condition now, can we?
We have a motion in a second, so if this survives,
Okay,
no, but if it does not survive, then we can form another motion.
Okay.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, at this time, we've got a motion to approve the SLUP with staff conditions with the limitation, reducing the allowance for demolition to 1 year. Hearing a motion in a second, all those in favor of approving the motion as formed, please raise your hands. All opposed, like sign. Okay, motion carries 4-3, I believe. Did I get, okay. The motion carries 4-3. Okay, at this time, I'm going to look to you, Commissioner Brown, to form a companion motion to that one, if you please, for the concurrent variance.
Sure. I motion to go with staff's recommended denial of the variance for the increased parking.
Okay, so at this time, a motion has been formed by Commissioner Brown to deny the variance from section 27-202 regarding parking. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Hearing a motion in a second, is there any debate? Hearing no debate, all in favor of granting this motion as proposed, raise your hands, please. All opposed, like sign. Looks like that carries 7-0. Okay, I believe we have handled the new business, SLUP 22-03 and the concurrent variance. Staff at this time, is there any other business that we need to take up? Okay, is there any additional public comment? If you'd like to make public comment, please feel free to step up. Again, identify yourself. We cannot answer your question, but you're welcome to comment.
Oh, okay. Gray Plunkett, 1440 Vernon Ridge Court. He said memory care. I've been here all this time and I didn't hear that these residents were memory care. I didn't know if that was a mistake Mr. Brown made, or has this been a memory care and I didn't missed it for 2 hours. I thought these were senior residents that it wasn't specifically memory care. He said memory care a few minutes ago. And
Thank
I
you for your
didn't get
comment.
that idea.
Is there any other public comment at this time?
With all the opposition to this, especially the heartfelt comments you've heard from Dunwoody people, why isn't there a commission or a body that's helping these people who want to contribute to our city find another parcel of land that would be more appropriate, like the park that everyone is talking about on Vermac? That's my comment. Betty Fendrick, Dunwoody Close subdivision.
Mary Downing, I'm on Ashburn Court. I'm also happen to be in commercial real estate, so I know a lot about these types of uses. And what I saw was a site plan that has not been verified. We don't know if it's 0.38, we don't know if it's 0.50. So you've got dimensions on that plan that are not accurate. You have a rendering that is done by a professional that shows rolling hills and green space and trees. Those do not exist. What exists are real people that have to live next to this really large building. To your point, there's no garage. If this sells again as a home, there's no garage. You've got 80 square foot bedrooms. This is not a facility. They keep calling it a facility. They're marketing it as a home. Their own attorney is calling it a facility. We don't want to live next to a facility. This is a half-baked plan, a business plan that they told me in person that they came up with because when they started to demo the building, that they couldn't make it work. So to make it work, you're going to put together a business and take care of 7 people in this little enclosed space. Does there need to be commercial laundry? I would think you would need that for that many people. There are a lot of things that need to be worked out on this business plan
that are not taken into consideration. And this is not a good look for our community.
Thank you. Is there further public comment? All right, at this time, we will entertain commission comment. I'm going to start to my left, Commissioner Gordon.
I don't have any further comment.
Commissioner Cameron, Commissioner Harris.
Just a quick note, Commissioner Brown, you asked the question earlier if there were things that we could get ironed out. And one of the things that I think there are things. And so sometimes making sure that the numbers are correct, that the data that we've received, that there's specificity, for example, in fence heights. These are things that are have been common and very detail oriented. So I think that it's okay to sometimes hit pause. Doesn't mean yes or no. Pause means let's make sure all the ducks are in the row, so that there's full consideration. To Commissioner O'Brien's earlier point, we are recommending body only. And so this does help to flesh out questions and thoughts that our council is able to take this information and then be able to move forward as well.
Commissioner Edmondson. Commissioner Shan.
Just to kind of reiterate Commissioner Brown's point, that kind of helped change my mind a little is what would we get out of had we deferred this? I think a lot of the stuff that we were discussing and kind of recommending to get some clarification on wouldn't really necessarily change the outcome and the purpose of this project. And that's something that the staff I have confidence in will iron out during permitting if this was to get approved by our council.
Commissioner Brown.
Okay. Couple of quick things. First, I want to give a congratulations to Paul Leonhardt, the planning manager, on his recent Employee of Distinction Award from the city of Dunwoody. I can't see you, Paul, but and again, I just want to reiterate what folks said about, that we're a recommendation body. This still goes in front of city council. I encourage everybody to please go and express your same concerns for them, and hopefully the applicant, if there are some things that seem unclear to folks, so they could provide that clarification ahead of that time. And lastly, the gentleman spoke about my comment about memory care. That's my understanding of what it is. I think that is a category within personal home care. So.
Well, can I just say something to clear that up? Memory care and what they're doing is not exactly the same. You can have people that have many health conditions, but they're not going to just be servicing only people with memory impairments. I mean, there are people that have needs that don't even have that diagnosis that still need some oversight. So I don't want you to get caught up in that, because that really falls in line with assisted living. They have units for people like that. They have regulations for people like that that would apply to a larger facility. If you're dealing with memory care, then they have stipulations and rules there and they have to meet. So I don't want you to get the concept of 7 people wandering in the community and back up in the woods. That's not what this is about.
Okay, I want to bring this back to commission comment, please. So I'm going to go ahead and interrupt everybody, and thankfully I've got a mic to do so. Commissioner Brown, is there anything else?
No, that's all this time.
Okay, for my comment, I'd like it on the record that I voted against the motion to approve the SLUP. And the reason is multifold. First of all, the voices spoke very loud on one side of this equation, but really the main reason is because an extra month is going to allow us to figure out what we want and how we can get to yes. And by that, I mean, I would like to know more about what sort of concessions might be granted with regard to pervious versus impervious surfacing, in particular on the parking areas. I'd like to know whether we're looking at a fence type where there's a sight line through it or a non-sight line through it. I'd like the opportunity to ask for that. We already did get a concession tonight on the parking, and that's terrific. But I think there are other elements that we as a body could address or could recommend that would give city council additional methods and tools to get to yes. And I believe that the cost of 30 days and a couple more hours of our time is not too high for that, because while I don't disagree that this is an admirable and decent project, I believe that there are things that we can do to address many of these concerns, which I would be willing to bet my next paycheck are going to be heard in identical nature at council. So with that and said, unless there's anything further at this time, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you. Oh, good.